Yet another major playmaker not showing up to minicamp. This time it's Terry McLaurin, and so I'm very happy to be joined by David Harrison, who does Locked On Commanders, and talk about that and kind of the NFC East as a whole. Let's do it. It's Locked On NFL Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Locked On NFL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday. That means you got me, Luke Braun, at Luke Braun NFL. I do Locked On Vikings, and I'm here subbing in for Ross with David Harrison at DHarrison82. He does Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bucks. So thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. David, let's talk about your Commanders. I hear there's a little something going on with Terry McLaurin. Tell me about the situation. He's not showing up to minicamp. What's the deal?
Yeah, so Terry McLaurin, he's in a contract year, and he's been the best wide receiver on this team since he entered the National Football League. And some could argue, honestly, maybe the most impressive, if not the most flat-out talented wide receiver in the NFL. I think you have a hard time making that case, but at least making the best out of a bad situation. I mean, the man has had 8 starting quarterbacks in 3 years of play, and then you come into last season, he's supposed to have Ryan Fitzpatrick, this veteran who is finally going to have the best offense around him that he's ever had in his career, and he's going to help Terry take the next step and all these other things. And he gets injured in the first quarter of the season and is lost for the year. And you have Taylor Heineke, who really has a lot of limitations as an NFL quarterback. Yet Terry is still able to be one of the most productive wide receivers in the game today, and that just kind of shows the talent that Terry McLaurin brought with him from Ohio State when he entered the National Football League. Now he wants a new contract, right? And this kind of all started as, just a guy who wants a new contract, wants to stick with the team and do all these things. And the fan base loves him. And when you talk about a franchise like Washington, who needs all the good press they can possibly get, why wouldn't you keep, again, one of the top talented young receivers in the league who, oh, by the way, also isn't a diva, right? He's not out there doing all the TikTok craziness or showing up to training camp in helicopters.
He's no Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler. Exactly. I mean, he's just this down-to-earth team captain, leader of the team type of guy that you want. He's the type of guy you want to put on posters. You know what I mean? So why wouldn't you get a deal done? Up to now, they haven't gotten that deal done. Terry was in the building. He was at the facility for some of the off-season program stuff, some of the voluntary phase work and everything. Doing the right thing, doing the leadership thing. But as things have kind of continued and the team has not come to an agreement with him and his people, now things are moving to where we're getting to the mandatory minicamp part of this. And it has become as official as it can be until things get kicked off Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m. that Terry McLaurin is not going to be there. In fact, the last I was told, he's in Florida. So you couldn't, he can't be in Ashburn, Virginia Tuesday morning if he's in Florida. So he won't be there. Whether or not the team is going to fine him for not being present is still to be seen. But the bottom line is he's doing what he needs to for himself to try to ensure that he gets a new deal. Meanwhile, the team is trying to break in their new quarterback, Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and the joke I always say, there's about 20 top 10 receivers in the league right now.
Yeah.
And Terry McLaurin unquestionably one of them. And like when you have that guy, even though a lot of teams have that guy, you don't want to be one of the teams that doesn't have that guy. And Terry McLaurin's that guy. You got to keep him in the building. He's on the last year of a deal, right? That you don't want that dude playing on a contract here. You don't want him to tear an ACL and suddenly you might lose this guy to free agency because the situation's awkward right now. Like, get that dude locked down when you can. But the problem is, I mean, you look at these Cooper Kupp and Hunter Renfrow and all of these gigantic A.J. Brown contracts. Is Washington set up to, like, can they pay him? I don't know their cap situation off the top of my head. Are they able to pay him? Or is it one of those things where it's like, we'll give you what we can, but we can only give you so much, like by the rules, and he wants more than that? Or is it a situation where Washington could pay him, but they're playing hardball, which would kind of be its own set of issues?
They definitely can pay him. I mean, as of right now, the last I remember looking, I think they have about $18 million in salary cap space after freeing up the money that Landon Collins was supposed to get after. But as a June 1 cut, or a post-June 1st cut, he saved them a good amount of money. So they have the ability. I mean, again, if you look kind of at average annual values of contracts, every time one of these wide receivers signs a new deal, that average annual value just seems to climb and to climb. I mean, Cooper Kupp is getting $26.7 million. Hunter Renfrow is not getting 20s, but he's getting $16 million on average per year. So, earlier in this conversation, when we're kind of going through and saying, what's the valuation on Terry McLaurin? What could he reasonably expect to get? I think you had Christian Kirk signing his deal, and then you had Devontae Adams kind of come through. So it kind of gave you a benchmark where I kind of sat there. I'm like, 22 and a half on average is probably what you're looking for in that deal. Now, again, you have guaranteed money and incentives and all those things that kind of balance everything out. But 22 and a half on average for the life of the contract is probably around the ballpark of what you're looking. But at the time, I kind of conceded the Washington might be able to get him at about 18 to 20 million average if they guarantee more of that up front and then leave less of it to incentives. 22 and a half if less is guaranteed, but more of it is available, incentives, all those things. But then, again, you have Hunter Renfrow coming in at 16, and no disrespect to Hunter Renfrow. He's been great for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he's done, I think, more in his career, short time so far in the league than most people expected him to when he was coming out of school. But Terry McLaurin is head and shoulders above Hunter Renfrow as far as what he can do for a team. So if Hunter is getting 16 mil on average, you're not getting away with giving Terry McLaurin less than 20. So your floor, I think, is 20 million, and your ceiling might be closer to 23 or 23.5 million now, especially with Cooper Kupp up there at 26.7. So, I mean, these are all things that have to be worked out. And it seems like every time another receiver signs a contract, not only does Washington not actually sign one with Terry, but they almost seem to get further apart.
Right, because the market is now changed and now it's that much harder and all that. It's one of those things where you hope, if you're a Commanders fan, that this gets worked out next week and we've forgotten about it by the time they're playing meaningful football. Yeah. But it's the Commanders. I feel like the Commanders never give their fans swift and clean resolutions to anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you host Locked On Vikings, podcast, and a lot of fans reference back to Kirk Cousins and the circus and the rodeo that they went through with him at quarterback and tagging him year after year after year. And instead of signing him to long-term deals, and then you look at Brandon Scherff, that's another player that, the team kept saying, we want Brandon here long-term. Brandon kept saying he wanted to be in Washington his entire career. But then you kind of saw those games start getting played. The front office came out and literally told everybody, we made Brandon Scherff a contract offer that would have made him the richest offensive lineman in league history. Well, again, how much of that was in guarantees and how much of that was tied to incentives, because people kind of fall short of understanding that, a $100 million contract for A.J. Brown over 4 years is not really $100 million for A.J. Brown over 4 years. So you might have made the offer to Brandon Scherff, but if 30% of that alone is tied to games played when he's got injury issues, that contract value is going to dwindle down really, really fast. So we don't know what the official offers that were made to Brandon Scherff. All we know is Kirk Cousins is in Minnesota, Brandon Scherff is in Jacksonville. So the question now becomes, is Terry McLaurin the next guy that's going to be a really good player for the Burgundy and Gold and then eventually play for another team?
Right. And where that places them in the division as a whole, which is, I guess, the next thing we should kind of zoom out and talk about where the Commanders belong in the NFC East. And if they do let Terry McLaurin walk, great, you save some money, but does that just mean you're back kind of to square one trying to build, who are you building around now? And I guess that becomes my bigger question. I don't have a great sense for the Commanders, so I'm really glad you're here. So that's, I guess, what we'll talk about next.
Yeah, so I mean, the layers and layers of the Terry McLaurin conversation, not only how it impacts the Commanders, but like you said, the NFC East as a whole. We'll talk about that thanks to our friends over at BlueNile.com. You can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Build the engagement ring of her dreams or celebrate life's special moments with fine jewelry. No matter what you're looking for, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On NFL listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Just use the promo code Locked On at BlueNile.com. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today.
Look, I know a lot of you guys really liked what we did for the draft, the ultimate mock draft that we all did here at the Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Network. That was very cool, and the NBA is now doing theirs. They got like 50 experts, local experts from every single team, including your favorite team, big board draft experts, plus all the Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. Search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. David, if Terry McLaurin leaves, where do the Commanders land? Like, what is the identity of the Washington Commanders? Are they now a Carson Wentz team? Is there a defensive guy that we should know about? Because when I think Commanders right now, Terry McLaurin's the first player that comes to my mind.
Right.
Who does that guy become if they don't get this deal done?
I think, interestingly enough, I think the Washington Commanders are still a defensive-minded team. I think this is still a team that, under the vision of Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, and everything that they've done, you look at all the draft pick investments, the first-round picks all across the front line on the defense with Chase Young, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat. They didn't go first-round defense this year, which, by the way, it's the first time that a first-round pick was not spent on a defensive player since Dwayne Haskins was drafted with the 15th overall pick back in 2019. They took Montez Sweat, the 26th pick in that same first round. Every pick since then in the first round for Washington has been a defensive player. So Jahan Dodson represents the first round pick for the offense for this regime, and since even going back into the last regime, that kind of solidifies the identity, right? That's what this team wants to be. That's what they wanted to be last year. The problem is, as Ryan Fitzpatrick is going down, the defense is also struggling coming out the chute. Now, a lot of that was laid to the feet of Chase Young, who wasn't around for a lot of the offseason conditioning and team building exercises and all those things. He's around more now this offseason than he was last year, trying to fix some of those things. But at the end of the day, that's where I think this team wants to sit. They want to have games that come in they want final scores that are less than 25 on either side of the ball, and they want to run the ball. You see Brian Robinson Jr. get drafted out of Alabama in the third round this year to join Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick coming back, Jarrett Patterson, the impressive undrafted rookie from last year. So I think this is a team that, even with Carson, even if Terry comes back with Curtis Samuel healthy and Jahan Dotson a first-round pick, they want to be able to grind the clock, play from ahead, use their defense to frustrate opposing offenses. But what they saw last year is they also needed to improve their ability to make up ground if they were playing from behind. That's where Carson Wentz comes in. He can throw the deep ball if needed, so he can try to get those 3 or 4 play drives going if they really need them, or a 2-minute drill with some confidence. But ideally, they don't want that. So I think the identity with Terry on the field, the identity without him, is still the same. The question now is, or the real impact here is obviously from a defensive standpoint. If Terry McLaurin's on the field, you probably feel comfortable as long as you give up less than, say, 25 points or less per game. You feel like there's enough on the offense to pull you out of that game and get a victory. Without Terry McLaurin, now you're talking like you need to give up no more than maybe 22 points a game if you want to have a chance to win those things.
It's a hard way to live. As a Vikings fan, that is the way we tried to live for basically the entire time Mike Zimmer was the coach, and now they're going to hire a guy out of McVay's offense. They're going a different direction. It's a tough way to live, but what I will say is if you are a roster that needs a little more talent, if you're a younger roster or if you've got holes on the roster, some of the most stunning upsets we've ever seen in the league are games where each team had 8 possessions because someone was running the ball and there was a lot of clock chewing going on. And, it's a lot easier for an underdog to surprise some juggernaut when you only have to stop them on 8 drives than, fast, when you need to get 16 stops. Those kind of upsets can make a lot of stats, and a lot of things get really fluky when the samples get small. So sometimes you can make the samples small on purpose, and right. That feels like a way to go. So I guess we'll talk in a little bit about the other 3 teams, I think, in the division and where they stack up and all that. But where do you think the Commanders stack up? Like if you were to go to BetOnline right now and you could bet, first, second, third in the division, what would you pick?
If I had to do it right now, I think I would put Washington third place. And that's really not even so much a down view of the Washington Commanders per se. It's just, again, there were, by and large, this roster is not a whole lot different on defense, which is good from a continuity standpoint, good from a comfortability standpoint. And William Jackson III, the cornerback that Washington signed last offseason away from the Cincinnati Bengals, kind of talked about this. Last year he was not only getting to know a new scheme, new playbook, new coach mentality, but he's also getting to know his teammates for the first time. And they come out the gate struggling, which obviously kind of detracts from the bonding. And, there's not a whole lot of kumbaya moments when you're on losing streaks and stuff like that. So now this year come in fresh, everybody's 0-0. Everybody is a Super Bowl champion in the making potentially. So you have a little bit more comfortability. You're not learning things. Now you're coming in day one this year with all the knowledge. Now you're just kind of getting your body back into that muscle memory. So it makes a little bit of a difference. So while the defense is still by and large the same defense that we saw at the end of last season, that's good in the comfortability sense. But the last time we saw this defense, the team was losing a lot of games, and they weren't really the dominant force that a lot of people hoped that they would be. So there's still a lot of question marks, even though there's familiarity on the offensive side of the ball. You have actually a lot of pieces that are going to be new to this team. You've got new offensive linemen. You've got a new quarterback that everybody agrees is a physical upgrade over Taylor Heineke. Curtis Samuel appeared in 5 games in 2021, but really didn't play. I would basically go down and say he didn't really play for them in 2021, his first year on the team. But now he looks really healthy. He's cutting real smooth, making a lot of moves with confidence. Jahan Dodson and Carson Wentz seem to be on a good page. And again, if you can get Terry McLaurin back out there, and the running back room was missing a little bit of thump in it by losing Peyton Barber. Brian Robinson Jr. brings a little bit of that, but he also has some 3-down back potential that we've seen so far. So with as much change as there's been on the offense, really even going back to players that were technically on the roster, just not on the field last year, that's reason for excitement, right? But it's also reason for we don't know what to expect, because how quickly are they going to gel? And if they don't gel very quickly and they start off 0-2, 0-3, that's a lot of pressure. And now you're struggling to click, you're struggling to come together, but you're also on a losing streak. So there's more pressure and people start pressing more, et cetera, et cetera. That's how things can kind of snowball. So it's really kind of an up in the air thing. So for me, on paper, I would say that they're the number 2 roster. Like if I were just picking Madden, right, I would say they're the second best team by overall ratings. But because of what we've seen last and the fact that we haven't seen this thing put together yet, I would put them 3rd in the division.
So if you at BetOnline, they are even odds to be 3rd and 4th. And if they did end up 2nd, that'd be a bigger upset. But basically, BetOnline is pretty much torn between Dallas and Philadelphia, slight edge to Dallas, and then New York and Washington. They gave a slight edge to Washington over the Giants.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, I have the gap between Washington and the Giants. Like I have the gap. The Giants are at the bottom for me. They're going to be until they move on from Daniel Jones. Like I know that they want to see if he is or isn't the guy. To me, that question's already been answered. He's not the guy. He hasn't been the guy. The issues he has in the NFL, he had them in Duke. You know what I mean? Like they just haven't gotten fixed. And I mean, I don't like you can bring as many different coaches as you want, but if the guy has these same issues, it's likely what I'm saying, like Daniel Jones it's not that he hasn't been coached to not do some of the things that he's doing. It's just that's who he is.
For sure. And if you want to bet on any of those things, or NFL, NBA, you can bet on hockey finals, whatever you want to bet on. You can even play your favorite Vegas casino games, bet on whatever this weekend's big fight is, anything. You can find all of that at betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, let's keep talking about those New York Giants. So outside of Daniel Jones, who I think we can all agree, I am not a Carson Wentz guy. I'd still probably take Wentz over Daniel Jones. It just doesn't seem like he is panning out to be the guy that they drafted 6th overall that they thought they got. What about New York? If a time traveler came and said, New York won the division, what do they cite as the reason? Like what breaks that makes them a good team?
All the other 3 teams had starting quarterback injuries in week 1. That's what's gonna have to happen, and that's
yeah.
I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I mean it just really kind of is what it is. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau, their number 1, one of their first round picks. I was kind of in that group that was kind of like, okay, he's near the top of this class, but this is a class that doesn't really have a very rich top 5, top 10, part of the class. There's some good players in there that I liked. I liked Sauce Gardner, but I don't think Sauce Gardner is going to be, the next Deion Sanders, like change the game from the cornerback position. Evan Neal is a good improvement for the right tackle position, but again, you're just trying to kind of make up for missed picks. In the past, you've had some other picks in the offensive line, some other moves that really haven't panned out. So it's not even so much like you're building on a strength. You're actually trying to make up for some past mistakes there. So I don't know if you would even call it breaking even. I mean, Kadarius Toney has had his issues. Kenny Golladay late in the season for the New York Giants really looked like he basically given up on the team, and that's never what you want to see out of your quote unquote prized free agent acquisition from the year before. And with everything else on the field, you still have Daniel Jones. And again, it ends and starts with the quarterback. And Daniel Jones, again, he just doesn't elicit a lot of confidence or inspire a lot of energy from his teammates. And I think you can kind of see that from around the building.
Yeah, and it's clear like Dave Gettleman really drove that whole operation. I think every Giants fan would agree. Dave Gettleman drove that operation into the abyss, into hell, and it's going to take some time to climb out. And so the way I see it is like, all right, wipe that clean, wipe that slate clean. Andrew Thomas, whatever, you need a cornerstone tackle, you don't have a cornerstone tackle. Even if you spent a whole bunch of picks on a cornerstone tackle and none of them worked out, that was the last guy. Get your guy in, right? And so I like the offseason the Giants had, but I don't think anybody has any expectation of them doing anything remotely competitive. They're more sort of sitting in a limbo trying to pull the pieces together and put together a foundation that you can build around in future years. So let's talk instead about the teams that are favored to be the two teams vying for the NFC East title, the Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. I find the Philadelphia Eagles fascinating this year. I think they just had a really interesting roster, and I'm really excited to see how it pulls together. But let's get right to the chase. Cowboys or Eagles? Who do you got?
I've got Eagles right now, and I mean, I think this was a closer contest than a lot of people really understood last year, even with some of Jalen Hurts and his limitations as an NFL quarterback so far. So if Jalen Hurts can take a step further, and I'm not saying he's going to become one of the best passers in the league, but if he can become just a solid quarterback, a solid passer that other teams have to defend against. You've got A.J. Brown out there, which I think is going to really open some things up for Devonta Smith. Last year he's getting teams' best guys here. He's getting the double coverage. He's getting the strength. When a team rolls, they're rolling to his side. Well, now this year they're going to have to roll to A.J. Brown. They're going to have to double A.J. Brown, put their best guy on him. So I think Smith is going to get a little bit more room to work. Quez Watkins, then, trickle down economics is going to get some more room to work. And again, so Jalen Hurts can take even a micro step, towards being an average NFL quarterback from a throwing standpoint, then I think this team has a lot. And the Dallas Cowboys, last time we saw them, they were on the top of the NFC East, but I think they've come down a little bit to the mean, while the Eagles and the Washington Commanders, at least on paper, have risen up a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm with you in that, like, the offseason, Philly had a great offseason. I really do like what the Eagles have done to turn their team from a 7 seed into something potentially more. Right. In terms of, going out and getting A.J. Brown, I love that kind of move. Just go get a bona fide, true good player that the cost of him, nobody's going to be talking about how many draft picks he was when he's scoring touchdowns for you on Sunday.
Yep. Best wide receiver in Titans history.
Yeah. I'm just not sold on Jalen Hurts. I don't know about the step forward or anything like that. And so I'm going with the Cowboys just because I'm very sold on Dak Prescott. He has won me. And Jalen Hurts kind of hasn't. Yeah. Mostly, there are just some moments from last season where that just sort of soured me on him. And look, I watched the primetime games. I watched the games that I was like expected to cover. So there could be evidence that I am missing, and Eagles fans, you just go ahead and let me know. I would love to hear it.
I mean, I don't think you're missing anything. Like, I love Jalen Hurts. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Jalen Hurts, but I think Jalen Hurts kind of just is what he is. And I mean, I'm the same, but I haven't seen every Eagles game, right? But talking to Louie and talking to Gino, I talked to Louie a good amount down the Senior Bowl as well. And the question really is what is Jalen Hurts' quarterback ceiling as a passer? That's really the question. Yeah. Leadership, football IQ, athleticism, he's got all that. It's the arm talent, it's the passing ability and the ability to diagnose the field. So that's the question. And really, from the quarterback position, I think the Giants and Eagles are really in very similar positions. The difference is the Eagles, you at least have some playmaking ability from your quarterback, where the Giants are struggling. But if both of these things don't flower, I guess is a good way to put it, for the Giants and Eagles, you could look, Luke, honestly, at both of these teams. If they're not already sitting, I mean, I don't expect the Eagles to be sitting top 5. The Giants might be, but if they're not sitting top 5 in the 2023 NFL draft, you could see them trying to make moves to potentially get in the top 5 to go get a new quarterback.
And Philadelphia has stacked up some ammo to give themselves that option.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me with Hurts, it's not like I don't think he's the worst quarterback in the league or anything. I might say Daniel Jones has a chance to be the worst quarterback in the league that starts. That could happen. Yes. You're never going to go that far with Jalen Hurts. It's more that there are just moments from last season that stick out in my mind that I need to I need to be convinced that that's not in him anymore. And that would be the next step is a step of like consistency. So if I'm to buy the Eagles, I think if the Eagles are to be like, let's go all the way. If they're to be a Super Bowl contender, Jalen Hurts needs to be at a level of consistency that we haven't really seen from him even close. And that would be the step he needs to take, because there are also moments where you're like, man, this dude's a playmaker. This dude absolutely rules. Can you do 16 of that though? And stay healthy for it all and all that stuff. That is where it's going to be, because being the best quarterback in the league for 8 games and being a disaster for 8 games means you're 8-8 and out of the playoffs.
Right.
And so for that reason, I like what the Cowboys have. I like what they have already. I don't think any of these teams are the teams I fear the most in the NFC. No. Give that to the Bucs or the Packers. Right. But I think the Cowboys still win this division just because of all those quarterbacks. Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, I don't buy it. Jalen Hurts, I'm willing to buy it if he does the right things. Dak Prescott, I buy it. Give me Dak Prescott. And that is, he's got all the experience. And like if I see anybody putting together a 12-win season, it's a team led by Dak Prescott.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Dak, you have, the devil that right? And that's, what they always say, right? Dance with the devil instead of the one you don't. Every quarterback in the NFC East has major questions around them outside of Dak. I mean, there's always going to be questions around Dak Prescott. Amari Cooper is gone, so how much is that going to impact things? Is Michael Gallup really ready to step into that full-time number 2 role? I love Jalen Tolbert, so adding him to the offense, as much as I don't want to see the Cowboys succeeding against, the NFC East rivals, I think Jalen Tolbert was a really good pick there in the 3rd round for them. We'll see how they can kind of incorporate him. And then I think the biggest question you have on the Cowboys offense really is Ezekiel Elliott. Like, is the Zeke that we saw early in his career really gone, or is he going to come back? And is the Cowboys offense really going to turn into an offense that can lean on him? But I think you have more comfortability with the Cowboys and more what ifs and what could be with teams like the Commanders and the Eagles. But I mean, all things being equal, if the Commanders can kind of get what they think they can get from their team and the Eagles can get what they think they can get from their team, I think one of those 3 teams obviously is going to win the NFC East. But I think that the spread is 1 or 2 games at the end of the season for who wins and who's out.
As it always is with the NFC East. I'll give Eagles fans this one thing at the end here. Look, if I had to bet, I would probably take the favored Cowboys to win the division. But if you want me to step onto a bandwagon for 3 years, I'm taking the Eagles, no doubt. The Cowboys, I don't like their 1st-round pick. In fairness, I didn't like their 1st-round pick last year. I was super wrong about that. But I don't like taking a tackle that with like major holes in his pass blocking technique in the 1st round.
Right.
They lost Amari Cooper. Yeah. They paid a bunch of money to Michael Gallup. I think that is a direction that it feels like it's just begging to decline in a couple of years, whereas the Eagles have stacked a lot of things. And it's just the way Howie Roseman plays it. He plays it very similarly to the Rams, who just won the Super Bowl. Just have enough good players in here where we can be a contender, and the price tags be damned. And I always respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you there. I think, from a long-term aspect, yeah, I mean, the Cowboys look like a team on the decline, not the rise, while the Eagles and the Commanders and even the Giants, if you get past my Daniel Jones bias, if you look at the Giants,
if they go get a quarterback, it's a totally different world.
Exactly. Yeah. It is. It's totally, and even a healthy running back that, that could do wonders for that team as well. So yeah, I'm with you there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tomorrow y'all get Tony and James breaking down whatever's going on in the NFL. It is June, but there's still so much to talk about. So make sure you come around. We will see you all tomorrow here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.